like we said before, Bernie brought us together, a lot of us, and what we have to do now is, he's not president, we have to stay together. And to do that right now, our primary in Florida is August the 30th. So we have one weekend left for all these guys over here, for this guy over here who is a Bernie superdelegate and represented us correctly. We have just this weekend to help him get elected. So I just want to introduce to you Alan Grayson. He is my role model in a lot of ways, and he is one of the people who is pushing legislation so hard to try to get Social Security benefits expanded so people like my grandmother can go to the doctor. Give it up for Alan Grayson, guys.
I'd like to talk to you tonight, but actually I have a surrogate.
If you don't know Alan Grayson, then you don't know that he went to the floor of the House during the debate on health care and said, the Republican health care plan was don't get sick, and if you do get sick, die quickly. You also don't know that before he was elected to Congress, he went and prosecuted people who took advantage of our United States military, contractors who took advantage of our veterans and our military. He went and prosecuted those folks. And you also don't know that Alan Grayson is the only person in this race who has introduced legislation to expand and secure Social Security benefits for our seniors in perpetuity. I don't get to use this word much, but I have had the inestimable privilege of working for this man. When I got the first chance I had to bring him into Jacksonville, I told him about 9th and Liberty, the place where Vernell Bing lost his life to a police officer. This man came down, spent time with the mother, and when he turned to the crowd, because they couldn't get a microphone in his hand fast enough, he said, your government only gets to kill you for 2 reasons. One is treason, and the other is murder. And that young man had committed neither of those crimes. He deserved to still be alive.
Yes.
Yes. That's not the kind of thing politicians say. That's the kind of things true progressives that give their life to public service say. And that's Alan Grayson. I'm proud to be on his campaign team. I'm proud to stand here and to ask you to come to 7th and Main Street. 7th and Main. James and Carolyn came by today. Tom came by. We had a number of different folks that are here tonight that came by today and helped us make dials out to tell our friends, to tell our neighbors, to tell other Democrats to vote for this man, because he is the only person that we can send to the United States Senate that will truly represent our progressive values. I mean, imagine him working next to Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. With that, I want to introduce my dear friend, Alan Grayson.
I'm going to have to try to live up to that. Listen, I'm here to talk about something that seems like an odd notion lately. This idea that we can work together to make our lives better. And I think that was what the Sanders campaign was all about. This sense, whether you want to call it a revolution or anything else, this sense that if you do nothing, then the people in charge keep beating you down endlessly. The system is rigged, politically, socially, economically, in every way that you can imagine. It's rigged. And if we don't do anything to change it, then we end up getting screwed. I don't know how else to put it. And believe me, I sit in the chambers of power day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and I can verify for you, yes, the system is rigged. It's hopelessly rigged. The Democratic Party is spending $1 million of blue money to defeat me in this primary that we have on the 30th. It turns out they got the money from my opponent's father. He cut a check for $1 million, gave it to the party, and they ran ads touting a party endorsement of him without telling anybody that the money came from his father. What could be more right than that? I can give you countless examples. There is an actual war against the idea, the notion, that we can make things better by coming together. And that's what's really at stake this year. You know, it's gotten to grip. I used to tell people that you have only 3 friends in life. Your mama, God, and the Democratic Party. We're down to 2. That's the sad fact that we all face right now. And what can we do? We could say, to hell with it. But we came pretty close this year. I'm not talking about my race. My race is yet to be decided. I would appreciate your help between now and the 30th. It would mean a lot to me personally, and it would mean a lot to the idea, the notion that we can come together and make a better life for ourselves. You know, we are immersed, we're drenched, thanks to media, in what amounts to character assassination. What's happened is that the so-called leaders of both parties, the Republicans and Democrats, they figured out that they can deploy one weapon of mass distraction after another, trying to get you to think about anything except what really matters in an election. There's only 2 things that matter in an election. What's this candidate going to do for me? And what's this candidate going to do to me? That's it, okay? But they want you to think about nonsense, absolute nonsense. And why? Because it disempowers you. It takes away your power. You know, I remember all year long Bernie saying over and over and over again, I'm for this, I'm for that, I'm for this other thing. And yet reporters would ask him stupid questions like, is it true that you have dual citizenship with Israel? And on and on and on like that. Thank God the man had the patience to actually push past that because he understood what's at stake. What's at stake is the fact that we choose the leaders who make the rules, and the system has been utterly corrupted by dirty money. How can it be, ask yourself, how can it be that the person who stands before you is the only member of Congress in the entire country? We're talking about the congressman from Kansas, the congressman from Alaska, the congressman from California. I'm the only member of Congress who raised most of his campaign funds from small donors. 1 out of 435. What does that tell you about the other 434? What does it tell you that I'm the only candidate for the Senate in the entire country in either party, Democrat or Republican, who has raised most of his campaign funds from small donors who gave less than $200, 150,000 contributions? What does that tell you? What does it tell you that Bernie Sanders was able to create a juggernaut that actually was the best funded campaign of the year 2016, thanks entirely to small donors? Look up the person who gave the most to the competitive campaign, the other campaign. That was $2 million to the Super PAC. Look up the person who gave the most to Bernie Sanders' campaign, $10,400. The real legal limit, unless you want to indulge in Super PACs. And yet, we've reached the point where the candidates from both parties are bought and paid for. I see it happening every day. What happens is they slice the law into little pieces and they sell it off to the highest bidder. Here I am, somebody who fought and beat Wall Street twice in my first term in office. First, when I passed the Pay for Performance Act, which prohibited Wall Street from taking any bailout money and putting it in their pockets. And secondly, when I passed the bill, after 30 years of trying, 30 years that bill had been introduced, to audit the Federal Reserve and uncover $23 trillion in unreported bailouts. And my opponent in the primary has taken more money from Wall Street than any other Democrat in the House of Representatives. That's the truth. You can look it up. Maybe PolitiFact said it's true. So it must be true. PolitiFact said it was true, right? For damn sure it must be true, because half the things they say are false really are true. And vice versa. That's correct. That's correct. That's one way to find out. So here we have the perfect storm, if you will. The candidate who stood up to Wall Street, even though I was on the banking committee, and I got the same offers that everybody else gets all the time. And I stood up to them and beat them twice, versus the candidate who was on the take from day one. He's not a ranking Democrat on any banking subcommittee or any committee, and yet somehow or other more money finds its way into his pocket from Wall Street than any other Democrat and all but 2 Republicans. So this is the year. I mean, this is the year when push comes to shove, when we all have to decide what kind of future we're going to have. What kind of country is this going to be? Is this going to be a country where we make sure that ordinary people have a job, have a roof over their heads, have health coverage, have a car, have something saved up for their retirement, or is this going to be a country that consists of nothing but cheap labor and debt slavery? That's what's actually at stake this year. You know, they say every year that's what's at stake. Maybe they're right. But the fact is that over time, more and more and more gets taken away from us. More and more and more. One challenge after another to Social Security, to reduce it, not increase it, the way I've been fighting to do. One challenge to another to tear apart the Medicare system. One challenge after another to take away what we call the social safety net and make it into a war of all against all, where we're pitted against each other. And no one has a chance, because we're all underbidding each other. The employee gets $12, gets replaced an hour, gets replaced by the employee who makes $11. The employee who makes $11 an hour gets replaced by the employee who makes $10 an hour. That is the way it's set up. That's the way the system is set up. And then they all lose their jobs to the employee in Vietnam who makes 34 cents an hour. And that's the future that the leaders of both parties are trying to wedge us into. It's been decades since the proportion of the U.S. economy that's wages. Wages. The money you get for working has been as small as it is right now. And meanwhile, our foreign debts go up and up and up and up, and our jobs go overseas. You know, people talk about the trade deficit as some abstract concept. It's very simple. That's the difference between our money being spent to put them to work versus their money being spent to put us to work. That's what the trade deficit actually is. And the last 14 years of it have been the greatest trade deficits in the history of the United States, the greatest trade deficits in the history of the world, probably the greatest trade deficits in the history of the Milky Way galaxy. And who's doing anything about that? They're greasing the skids. This business about the Trans-Pacific Partnership that we're probably going to have to vote on after the election, you know, that just makes it worse. No one is standing up for basic concepts here in the United States, like the right to organize. You know, a few years ago, I wasn't even in office when I did this, I went to a Walmart on Thanksgiving night. I was annoyed by the fact that they were making people work and not even giving them time and a half for overtime on Thanksgiving night. So I went there and I brought in a bunch of paper bags with me. Inside was a turkey sandwich, bag of chips, and a letter about how to organize. I'm the only one who does things like that. I'm the only elected official who does things like that. And it shouldn't be that way. We should have people who are champions. Excuse me, while I turn this off. I'm sure it was super important. By the way, Sheila Jackson Lee was once giving a speech about a year and a half ago. She actually took the call, so you won't listen, you all, you represent the last best hope for democracy in America. Okay? You all. My opponent spent $5 million in 2 weeks on TV ads all through this state trying to bury this campaign, and we're still alive, and we're still alive thanks to people like you. Because no matter how much dirty money you collect, no matter how much sewer money you collect, and by the way, it's getting to be staggering even at the level of the House of Representatives, the state Senate, and now down to the state representative races, the fact remains, money can't vote. We were just talking about this in the back room. Money can't vote. And as Howard Dean pointed out and found through a scientific study, when he was the head of the Democratic Party a few years ago, the single most effective means of persuasion in any political campaign is a call from you. Much more persuasive than a TV ad, much more persuasive than a radio ad, much more persuasive than a robocall or a push poll or anything you can think of. Because in the end, when you call your neighbors, they listen to you. You connect with them in a way that doesn't happen very often in real life. And for sure, it means much more to them than some trash they receive in their mailbox or some nonsense that they see on TV. Nobody believes that stuff anymore. So you still have the power. You have the power to persuade. You have the power to organize. You have the power to make the world a better place. And you have the power to take our political discourse back from this misery where we're forced all the time to try to choose between the lesser of two evils. That's evil. That's evil. What we should be doing is trying to decide which candidate is going to make a better life for ordinary people. As Bernie said, which candidate is going to increase Social Security, not preserve it or protect it only, but actually increase it. Which candidate is going to increase Medicare benefits? Which candidate is going to make it possible for even a poor child to get a college education? Which candidate is going to make sure that we have a higher minimum wage? That everybody can see a doctor when they're sick? That we have paid sick leave and paid vacations, and that you get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work? All of that, these are all concepts that are being lost as we see people attack each other and attack incessantly because they're unwilling and unable to explain an answer to the simple question, what are you going to do for me? So your efforts as volunteers, your efforts as part of the political process, in some cases, your own efforts as candidates, this is really crucial. This is our last best hope. In Washington, D.C. now, there's a great debate going on. Okay? There's some people who say that we're an oligarchy. Okay? There are other people who say that we're a plutocracy. And they actually argue with each other. Are we an oligarchy or are we a plutocracy? There is an alternative. And that alternative is something that Abraham Lincoln spoke about 150 years ago. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And it's my job and your job that we make absolutely certain that that does not perish from the earth. Thank you very much.